Well, for all of our lives, we've lived in a world of boys and girls, but that is changing along with everything else in 2017. In Canada, the country directly to our north, the parent of a baby successfully petitioned to have that child given an ID card with no sex listed, insisting that that is for the baby to decide. Things may not stop there. They probably won't. The Gender-Free ID Coalition is calling on the Canadian government to eliminate sex and gender classifications for all children throughout that country. Are we ready for a world here where baby boys and girls are replaced by baby somethings? Nell Gibbon-Daly is a psychotherapist, and she joins us tonight. Nell, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you so much, Tucker, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So these are questions that didn't exist like 18 months ago. Homo sapiens have been around 300,000 years, and for the most part, it was kind of obvious who the boys and girls were. But we've decided in a very short period of time that none of that is real, and we're changing it, because why?
Well, to be honest with you, we believe that people who are considered intersex, people who are born with both sets of genitalia, have existed throughout human history.
For sure.
So the federal government just released a study in 2016 that 1.4 million people now identify themselves as transgendered, and Canada isn't the only place that's doing this. Legislation was just introduced in Washington, D.C. and in New York over the past couple of months to also have parents have the right to, on a child's birth certificate, not just say that the child is male or female, but also X or unidentified.
But I think you may be conflating two things.
Sure.
So the number of intersex births in this country, that is where a child has both sets, partially or fully formed, of genitalia, is maybe a little over 700 per year out of about 4 million births. So it's less than 1/10 of 1%. So very small numbers, tiny number. Okay.
Sorry, Tucker.
And probably we can assume that's been consistent through time. But and nobody is suggesting that you force a sex onto a child whose sex is not clear. But for most kids, overwhelming number of kids, it is clear. So why should we pretend it's not clear? I guess that's the question.
I think it's a great question. I mean, as to your statistic, I had trouble finding accurate numbers as to how many children are born in this country who are intersex.
Right.
I got numbers that say 1 out of every 1,500 births, also 1 out of every 100 births, where there is some sort of either anomaly.
Hold on. 1 out of every 100 births has there is separate sets of genitalia.
Well,
I don't think that's right.
It doesn't have to go that far. So there could be some sort of like genetic, I don't want to say abnormality, but an anomaly, right? Like a chromosomal anomaly that it's not so clear, meaning that gender is not necessarily based on genitalia. And so I think your other question, though, is should we give people the right to say we're going to raise a child as non-binary, meaning we're not going to raise a child as male or female, which is something that the couple in Canada is
right. Because,
doing.
I mean, there are legitimate, I think, medical situations, and you've just described some of them, where, it's an open question, and I would never deny that. And, of course, you want to respond compassionately. But that's not what this case is about. This case is about the idea that you get to choose what your sex is, which is a denial of biology. And there's also, and I think as a psychotherapist you'd agree, a cost to a child. If you say to a little kid, I don't know if you're male or female, you decide, I don't think you're going to get a good outcome a lot of the time at all. That's why people have never done that through human history. You know,
the couple that is, or the person who's deciding to do this with their child up in Canada, the point, I spoke to them on the phone, the point that they are making is that this child is a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being having a spiritual experience. So it's actually a very spiritual endeavor. And what it's saying is that let's just let the child be a child, and eventually the child will decide what it wants to be, how much it wants to identify as a boy or how much it wants to identify as a girl. And this person is also saying that it's not that I'm not going to raise a child as a girl or a boy. I'm just going to say to the child, you just be a child, just be an individual for a while. Let's not have the government interfere with who you are. Let's not put a set of preconceived notions about who you are onto you. Let's just let you develop as a human being, and eventually you can decide whether or not you want to be a boy or girl or non-binary.
Yeah, but you can't actually decide. And I'm for choice, and there are a lot of biological realities that I'm sad about, that I would change about I'm sincere, that I would change about myself. And so I'm not attacking anybody, but don't you think that biological reality matters, and lying to kids and telling them, actually you could be 6'7", or you could have blue eyes instead of brown, or whatever. I mean, those are lies, and it's never a good idea to lie to kids, is it?
I don't think it's a lie. I think it's actually giving children more information at a younger age than we traditionally have, right? So it's like, I'm going to give a comparison. It's like raising a child to not assume that they're heterosexual. Right? The way I've raised my children is to say, like, I don't know what they're going to be, and I'm not just going to assume that they're gay or they're straight. I just give them lots of information, expose them to lots of people.
There's a difference here, because whereas, you know, we don't know a lot about the biology of homosexuality, we know a lot about the biology of sex, because we know that it begins on the chromosomal level. Like, there's a science piece to this that's being ignored by people who I thought believed in science. So that's why I'm a little bit confused.
I don't think it's being ignored. I think what we're seeing, though, in the federal study and what's come out in terms of the Census Bureau is that if 1.4 million people don't identify with the gender marker that they were given at birth, we have to take note of that and say what's going on, that there's a fluidity about gender, and it's not necessarily rooted in biology.
Why does that not extend to race?
Tell me what you mean by that. You're going to have to explain that one to me.
If I can say I'm a woman, why can't I say I'm a Chinese woman and be taken every bit as seriously? And I'm not mocking you. I'm making a sincere point, and it's a sincere question. What's the difference?
You know, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think as we progress as a society, some of these labels that we're putting on things, and I can't necessarily go to the race question, although one of the things that I've loved about your program as of late is that you're really into this idea of having a more inclusive society and being less separatist in terms of race, that we should be more inclusive. And I think that that's what we're saying. We're creating a space at the table for people to be to have optionality in terms of how they want to identify themselves.
Okay. Well, as long as we're still science-based, then, you know, as a child of the Enlightenment,
it's not taking science off the table. It's just saying, can we look at it from another perspective?
Okay. Nell, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Tucker, so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, last May, the Obama administration announced a new rule requiring every public school in the country to let transgender students use whichever bathroom or locker room match their preferred gender identity. Well, yesterday, the Trump administration retracted that rule, saying that bathroom policies like these are state issues and shouldn't be set by the decrees of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Zach Pecanis is the senior advisor to the DNC and helms their Trump war room. This morning on Twitter, he called President Trump a monster for reverting to the policy in place just 1 year ago. He joins us now. Zach, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, I mean, I think there are two sides to every debate, including this one. What I was so struck by was your tweet where you, and I'm reading it now, I woke up feeling so sick to my stomach about the Trump White House's attacks on vulnerable LGBT kids. These people are monsters. And I thought to myself, was Obama attacking vulnerable LGBT kids a year ago before putting this policy into place? He spent 7 years as president and didn't do this. Was he a monster attacking LGBT kids during that time?
Well, I mean, what we know is that he put these protections in place. And let's be clear about what we're actually talking about. This is guidance that was provided to schools that schools wanted and asked for. And it's for a very specific reason. They wanted to create a safe environment for all the kids in their school, and they wanted to avoid Title IX lawsuits. I mean, that's what's so mind-boggling about what the Trump administration did today. He took away practical guidance to school administrators and principals who were looking to create this safe environment and were looking to not get sued for Title IX violations.
I mean, those guidelines still exist on the internet, presumably, and they could look them up. It's not like they're disappearing from the English language. And so I still am waiting for the answer to my question, though. It took the Obama people 7 years to do this. And that's fine with me, but I'm not the one calling people monsters for pulling them back. So, like, are you giving President Obama a pass for not acting on this sooner?
I'm giving President Obama extraordinary praise for taking decisive action to protect these vulnerable kids. And I am saying that Donald Trump is not only a monster, but he's a coward. We're talking about somebody who is so emasculated by Vladimir Putin that he has to.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you there because now we're getting off in a crazy world.
That he has to come back and pick on vulnerable kids. These kids are the most vulnerable children in the country.
Slow down, Zach. Let's get to the core of the issue. Do you mind? Look, I get that I'm never going to get you to say that Obama should have done it. That's fine. Let's move from the politics to the science, because this policy has implications that go far beyond bathrooms and locker rooms. The core question is what constitutes male and female. And the implication of these guidelines that Obama put in place is that a man is someone who says he's a man, and a woman is someone who says she's a woman. You get to decide your gender. There's no biological anchor to sex anymore. It's all determined by the individual. So my obvious question for you is, how do I know if a person's male or female? Is there some other absolute standard that people have to meet to be male or female, other than what they say?
One's gender identity is enough to show what gender they are. And so if you're confused about that, I mean, I leave that, to your level of enlightenment and
no, it's not about enlightenment. It's not about moral status. This is a real question because there are all kinds of institutions in American life that function on a sex-segregated basis. Women's college, sports, both professional and amateur, prisons. And so you're telling me that I can play on a women's sports team when I say I'm a woman.
What we are saying is that in this guidance with public schools, which and the vulnerable kids that are there, that there are specific guidelines that these teachers and these supervisors and these principals asked for in how to create safe.
Okay, but now you're going back to the first question. You just said a second ago that
that is what we're talking about.
No, let me take you back 3 sentences. When you said gender identity is determined by the person who possesses it. That's almost exactly what you said.
Correct.
And I'm saying there are massive implications of this that everyone is either too dumb or too embarrassed to explore, but let's do so now. If your sex is what you say it is, then what prevents me from playing on a women's field hockey team? What prevents me from getting convicted of a felony and demanding to go to a women's prison? And it's a real question.
It's not a real question.
Why is it not a real question?
It's not a real question because it is pretty absurd, and there are no other examples.
Because why?
Because there are no examples of this. What
do you mean?
I'm sorry, but there are no examples. This is the same argument about saying that this will allow sexual predators to go into women.
I'm not making that argument.
Yes, but you are making that argument.
Okay, what I'm saying is, I just want to know what the standards are. I'm not actually making any claims. I'm merely asking a question, and I want you to answer.
Yes, the standards are
Is there a scientific standard? Because when you deal with questions of biology, that is a species of science. So what's the scientific standard? I'm a scientist. I want to know if you're a man or a woman. How do I find out?
Look, these are discussions that I encourage you to have with someone who is transgender, and they can come and talk to you about.
I don't need that to speak to a I can speak to you because you think about this stuff for a living. So it's a very simple question.
Yes.
I want to know if you're a man or a woman. I'm a scientist. How do I find out?
Your gender identity determines your gender, period.
Okay. So should someone who looks like me, I look like a man, you think I was a man, I say I'm a woman, and I demand to play in a women's sports team, I demand to go to women's college, I demand a small business administration loan for women-owned businesses. That's a real thing. That's a billion-dollar question, for real. Can you turn me down if I say I'm a woman?
The question that is on the table right now is about Title IX.
Let's not
and about guidance. No, but you want to go off on
Title IX applies. It's not a tangent. Title IX applies and was created around the question of women's sports. So, as a apparent man, if I say I'm a woman, is that enough? Do I meet the standard as a woman to play in a women's sports team? That goes right to Title IX. Don't dodge the question.
I'm not dodging the question. This is something the Supreme Court is going to be looking at next month. And yes, the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Gender identity determines one's gender.
Let me ask you
period.
This.
This is a matter of civil rights.
Is there science behind this? Because I know that I'm often getting
science. Really, science.
I want you to name a single scientist, just one, who says you can determine your own sex just by saying so. Can you name one scientist who says that?
I'd be happy to send you many after.
A scientist who said you can determine your own sex, an actual scientist, like someone who went to college.
Listen,
are you serious?
You clearly have some issues around this.
It's not an issue at all. I have questions that you can't answer. And you're instead throwing things like you're not enlightened. I'm asking you a sincere question. What's the science behind this? And you're deflecting. Why?
I'm simply not deflecting. This is a matter of settled science, and it is something
What's the science exactly? That you are what you say you are? Could I change my race too? And don't dodge that question. That's a real question.
No, you cannot.
Why?
Change
Why
your race.
can't I change my race, but I can change my sex? What's the difference?
It is not about changing. It is not about changing.
But why
this
isn't
is about
it?
Inherently who people are.
Really? What if I say I'm inherently of another race? Who are you to say I'm not?
I mean, again, you're getting into these silly hypotheticals.
It's not silly at all. 2 years ago, nobody thought you could choose your own sex. And you're saying it's settled science.
One that is simply not true. We have had transgender protections in this country for decades.
But you haven't explained what transgender is. You're just saying it's whatever we say it is.
Look, you want to go into this in this right-wing pseudoscience.
It's not right-wing at all.
It absolutely is.
It's pseudoscience, right? You name. I will give you $1,000 if you can find any scientist, like an actual biologist, at an accredited American college willing to come on this show and say, here's the science, here's the state of play of biology 2017, name your sex, and that's what it is?
I don't understand.
You can't.
I don't understand why you won't answer the question about why.
I'll answer any question always.
Excellent. Why shouldn't schools who are asking for it get guidance on how to create safe environments for all their kids?
I would say that guidance exists it floats on the internet, and if it's merely guidance, then the federal government needs no more to do with it. They could say, here's our guidance. You're undermining your own argument, which was weak to begin with.
If it is as simple as that, then why do you care so much?
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm actually enjoying this, but I want you to produce the scientists, just one. And let's make it Harvard, and I'll give you $1,000. And I'm not attacking anybody. I'm just asking the question. Anyway, we're out of time. Zach, it was great to see you.